Welcome to Why Not Read Alpha Flight with Chris and Tom, or should I say, Why Not Have a Drink with Chris and Tom? That's right, folks. The holidays took their toll, and after no less than 5 scheduled recording sessions blew up for one reason or another, we decided to call off episode 19 until the kids get back into school. That's not true. There was only one reason they got blown up, and that's because I hadn't finished the script. But it's not my fault. Honest, I ran out of gas. I had a flat tire. I didn't have enough money for cab fare. My tux didn't come back from the cleaners. An old friend came in from out of town. Someone stole my car. There was an earthquake, a terrible flood, locusts. It wasn't my fault, I swear to God. So in order to keep up our regular release schedule, we are gifting you with our Thanksgiving special episode of Why Not Have a Drink, where Tom gets really excited about Highlander, and I get upset that swords do not work that way. And what better way to set the scene for us in Scotland than with the dulcet tones of the bagpipes, an instrument intended to be heard and appreciated across foggy green fields and hills, calling everyone who can hear to come and join in the age-old Scottish tradition of killing the English. And as you hear, my youngest daughter is with me recording today. Can you say hi?
Hi.
Enjoy, everybody. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
Welcome to Why Not Have a Drink with Chris and Tom, Thanksgiving edition. And while we plan to do specials throughout the year, there can be only one Thanksgiving episode because, that's right, we're doing a Highlander. Which has kind of always been a Thanksgiving tradition for me. For most of my childhood, Fox 32 in Chicago would play the same movies around the holidays, including a heavily edited for TV version of Highlander that I'd watched with my mom. The other main movie was Dragon Slayer with Peter McNichol, and we will absolutely do that someday. This movie, Highlander, it isn't even a core memory for me. It's a tentpole to my entire personality.
Wait, haven't you never seen, like, Inside Out or Inside Out 2?
That is correct. That doesn't mean I don't know the themes or the terms, but yeah, I've never seen it because I don't need that kind of pain in my life.
Man, that movie was like family therapy for my whole family. Like, everybody watched it, not a dry eye in the house. It was perfect. But, you do you, bro. You do you.
Yeah, my kids, I think they found it upsetting when they saw it at school.
That's because you have untraumatized kids, you lucky bastard.
Anyways, we'll dig into the what of Highlander shortly. But first, Chris, what was a tradition in your family around this time of year, especially like movie or show wise?
When I was a kid, my grandmother and grandfather lived in the same town as us, so my mom never had to cook. We just showed up and had fun, and my mom had the most glorious, like, 40s Thanksgiving experience because she never had to deal with it. So we mostly hung around the house, and my mom loved watching the parade on TV. However, my older sister and I loved watching bootleg VHS tapes of MST3K that our dad would mail to us. The specific episode that we would watch was MST3K episode 421, Monster A Go-Go, featuring the Circus on Ice short. It's glorious. If you haven't seen it, watch it. You get to hear Crow say, "Shut up and watch the deer die, honey." It's fantastic.
Were you a Crow person or a Tom Servo person? I know the answer. You were a Crow person.
I was a Crow person, although I bear Tom no
Yeah,
ill.
my little sister was more of a Servo, so we would kind of go back and forth about who was better.
Oh, she is a Servo.
Isn't she?
I know. Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
She listens to this podcast, so she'll hear that. But there was an episode.
Servo
it was actually
bastard.
It was the Alien in L.A. episode, Kathy Ireland's first ever movie. Yeah, Kathy Ireland.
Well, this is relevant to my interest.
Yeah. But there's a fight scene in that movie that's taking place like in the bowels of LA with like steam everywhere and pipes, and they're like swinging at each other, and it's back, the light's coming through the steam, and so they're just silhouettes. And as one of them is swinging high at the other, Crow screams out, "There can be only one!" And I felt so betrayed in that moment.
Well, see, my question, since you've watched it, is that swordplay better than the swordplay in Highlander?
Not remotely. Like, Alien in LA is, my God. is that a bad movie.
Okay, if it has worse swordplay than Highlander, then I have to watch it just to see the atrocious swordplay. Moving on. So, since this is a Why Not Have a Drink episode, Tom, what do you have to drink tonight?
Just to kind of keep it a little bit themed, I grabbed Founder's Dirty Bastard, which is a Scotch-style ale. It's actually been one of my favorite go-tos for quite some time. I really enjoy it. The label just says Dirty Bastard. It used to have a creepy looking dude with one of those, I don't even know what to call the hat, but the kind of hat that like a Scotsman would be wearing in the pub, like while like roasting Pete or something.
Like a pork pie hat type
Not
of
quite
thing?
pork pie, but it's got like, I don't know. It's like super ethnically coded.
You know what? This isn't a hat podcast.
It's really not. We can move past this point. Chris, I'm so rude. What are you drinking this evening?
Nothing nearly so fancy. I have a Seagram 7 and soda because that's what I had available to me. It was that or PBR. So I thought this fit the whole mood a little bit more.
I fully agree. And listeners, if you can't tell, I'm just giddy because this episode's like, it's about me, man. Like this is
Tom's baby.
This is a me episode, and so I'm a little hyped up about it. So we'll see how this goes.
All right, well, let's get to it, buddy. I look forward to sharing this childhood memory with you. How would you like to present this to our dear friends, the listeners?
Well, kicking things off a little bit, I think we should do two things. I think we should give a little bit of context as to why I keep bringing up this movie, and also just sort of set the scene a little bit for what Highlander itself is, in case you are somehow listening to us talk about this movie and have never seen it. This is probably the film I've seen the most, and not just because of all those Thanksgivings. I really do probably watch it like every 18 months or so. It's the kind of thing that's just sort of hardwired into my brain. The action, the music, we will be talking about Queen, absolutely.
Oh, yes.
And just the ideas running behind it. I was a huge ancient history and just like history and swords and castles like nerd as a kid. I had my 5th grade teacher teach me Greek because I was so into the myths. And yeah, modern Greek is wildly different, but it was a start. I taught myself hieroglyphics at one point. It was just, I was that kind of a kid.
Listeners, you absolutely hear why I'm friends with Tom. He's just a fascinating individual, and I'm really looking forward to letting him off the leash. So, bark, little doggy.
So a movie that has this operatic scope touches on ages past that still somehow exist through people walking around today and is more than a touch emo. Yeah, this is very much my shit. I will also say that The Crow and Highlander absolutely exist in the same universe, and I will fight you over this.
So who wins in a fight, Eric Draven or Connor MacLeod?
Frankly, it's going to be Eric, because Connor... well, I guess the better answer is this. They are both going to keep, like, stabbing and shooting each other, and eventually whoever figures out first, well, I guess I go for the head, is the one that wins.
Well, wait, so can we just take Deadpool and Wolverine and reskin it with Eric and Connor, and it's the same thing?
This is the best idea you have ever had. I am so excited for this. Oh, wow.
So, yeah, so this movie is all sorts of things to Tom. And Tom, since the Why Not Have a Drink series, Tom writes the scripts, and we flip it up so that there's a bit more Tom in these. This is your opportunity to shine and make me say some shit I wouldn't otherwise say. So where do we start?
Well, I think in this case, it's more talk about a thing that you wouldn't otherwise talk about. But let's do a little bit of scene setting. Highlander is a fantasy film set in 1980s New York City.
No, 1986. It is like
very
virtually
specific.
The exact same time our comics are in.
Man, I hadn't even made that connection yet, but yeah. Do you think that Northstar and Aurora ran into Connor at 54 when they were in New York?
Which one fucked him?
Which one didn't?
Oh, you're saying Connor. You know what? That's a bold statement. Back to the script, buddy.
It is set in 1986 New York with a number of flashbacks, specifically to 16th century Scotland. Introduced by a voiceover at the start, immortals have existed as long as humanity has. Immortals can only die when beheaded, and when one immortal kills another this way, the victor absorbs the other's power. And this is very vaguely defined throughout the movie, which is actually, I think, one of its one of the strongest aspects of this.
Yeah, I loved it. Yeah.
Eventually, the remaining immortals will feel pulled to a specific area. In this case, it's New York. And they will duel until only one remains and achieves the prize, which we don't really understand what it is until the end of the movie. And since this is not a blow-by-blow thing, basically, by being the final immortal and having essentially the wisdom of the ages, you also are now able to hear and feel every single thing and human on the planet and shape them and move them. So if it's a good immortal, they can move people towards understanding and peace and all that. If it's an evil immortal, they can ensure that it's like nothing but war and violence and terrible shit for the longest time.
You know, I kind of feel like the prize ought to get the same audio effect as the call.
Yes.
You even capitalized it in the script.
Well, it's capitalized in all the lore and whatnot, which I...
Oh, you read up on... Okay, you're the kind of person who reads up on Highlander lore. All right, Tom, this is going to be a great time. Here we go.
So what's so neat about this is that it's a very, very specific universe. But the way it's structured allows for an infinite variety of storytelling. This is actually something the series, the Highlander, the series does really well. It like goes in all sorts of directions because it can. You have characters who, by virtue of their longevity, can and often are everything. Like there is time enough to be Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy. There's time enough to be a lover, to be a monk, to be the villain, to be the hero. Like it's all there. But the core of who they are remains, but how it's expressed will and does change as the times around them do. It also creates a sort of secret parallel history to the world, which...
Hold on. I want to jump in before you get to that point. In comics terms, when Jamie Madrox sends out his dupes to go live long-form lives, they go out and one of them becomes an FBI agent, one of them becomes a priest, and one of them becomes this and that and that and that. And they all go out and they spend years living these separate lives and acquiring these skills, and then they all come back to Madrox Prime, and he absorbs them, and then he has all of their knowledge and all of their skills, and he has been all of those things, even though he never left New York himself. Except these guys have to live all these out sequentially and do that same thing, except iteratively over time. And apparently I'm here to comic-splain Highlander.
I mean, that was a perfect explanation. I mean, and it really is that. An immortal that lives long enough is able to live that long, so they have an ability to adapt and an ability to move through time. And because of that, they will acquire a host of skills. All right, so circling back, one of the things that this kind of setup does is that it also creates a secret parallel history to the world, which is neat, right? That sort of thought process absolutely feeds into conspiratorial thinking. I know this is our safe space, but that is a huge part of why we're in the position we are in the world right now. But at the same time, when not going down some of those dumber roads, quite frankly, it's just another way of wondering, right? Wondering what if, wondering why not.
You know, I'll say a movie about this secret history about immortals cutting each other's heads off in New York City is much more entertaining than a movie about the government controlling hurricanes.
Yeah. Plus, Highlander is a movie that has swords and sort of a low-key kind of magic in mid-1980s New York. And this isn't the Reagan era New York that Bret Easton Ellis or the movie Wall Street portray. I mean, this is the other side of it that actually feels more like the New York of the 1970s, right? Dangerous, decrepit, dirty, like everything is dripping. Like, even indoor spaces that are clean have like a weird drip in the corner going on. And despite all that, it's seductive as hell. Whatever else this movie is, and I know you don't love it, and we'll get into some of those reasons, and some of them I'll absolutely agree with, but like, this movie exists in a lived-in world. And a lot of movies never get close to feeling like that and fail for that.
You know, if you compare this to like an Avengers movie where everything is clean and plastic and freshly produced exactly for the movie and it's placed exactly where it's supposed to be to make this scene work, this one very much feels like dudes in costumes moving through the actuality of New York City. And that's great, honestly. Like, I think that's a neat aspect to this.
Yeah.
Like, if you were to compare this to like Daredevil. And when you watch the movie Daredevil, as opposed to you watch the movie this, New York City itself is a fantastic character in this movie in a way that Daredevil's New York City feels much more movie set.
The Daredevil movies, New York, could also be Boston. Like it could be Providence, you know? Like,
well, yeah, because Ben Affleck sounds like that.
There's that. But also it just doesn't feel necessarily New York. I mean, I will say that they lived in like this sort of like the dangerous edge to like a big city. And like, let's be clear, like, big cities, they're big goddamn cities. There is a danger there if you don't know what you're doing, or even if you do know what you're doing. Like, it's just a big place. Shit happens. I will say that the Daredevil Netflix series actually does hit on that in a much better way, much closer to what Highlander is pulling off, I think. All right, so last bit of scene setting before we kind of start wilding out a little bit. Like any universe, Highlander is nothing without rules. There can't be a game without rules. And that is how the Immortals refer to what they do. It's the game. And the rules are very simple. All fights are 1-on-1, and there is no fighting on holy ground. And that's kind of it. I mean, this is perfect in that the simpler the rules, the more easily understood the game is, because when you're dealing with Immortals hailing from every time period and culture that's ever happened, you kind of got to keep things really straightforward so everyone gets it. Quick side note, that Holy Ground rule is presented in the movie as just being tradition. Like, you know, you just don't screw around with Holy Ground.
You know, I noticed that very much when Kurgan and Connor talked. Yeah.
In Highlander, the series, there is actually a moment where it's explained why it might be more than tradition. There's an organization in Highlander the series called the Watchers, which are humans that have been like keeping tabs on Immortals for the longest time. And they have long chronicles about what's taking place. And they have one instance of two Immortals actually having a full-fledged duel with a victor on holy ground. And it was Pompeii. Which when they dropped that in the series, I was like, holy shit, that was amazing.
Did the victor get away?
That was not discussed. However, the Watcher must have, because they have a record of it. So, interesting.
Well, you and I talked and we established some themes that we wanted to go over, because listeners, we're not going to be, taking you through blow by blow like we would through an Alpha Flight issue on this one, because movies just don't work that way. So the first theme was, when you initially described this movie to me, and I didn't grow up with this movie. Like, I think I watched it maybe in college, possibly with you. I don't know. But, like, I know that I watched it once when I was a young man, but not a child. And then I watched it yesterday before we
when you weren't a girl, but not yet a woman?
Yeah, sure, buddy. Sure thing. Pat you condescendingly on the head. So the first theme that you had identified when I said, so what do you want to talk about? You said, this movie is as much a music video as it is a film. So, Tom, wax philosophical.
Well, so this is where the Queen bit comes back in. Queen basically created
Princes of the Universe.
Right, like, Queen pretty much wrote...
Can you cut that in every time you say the word Queen?
I will try to, yes. And this is the one that's absolutely going to get a copyright strike. And all of that just is going to stay in, too. Queen basically wrote an entire goddamn album just for this movie.
Oh, I listened to it while I was doing the dishes tonight to get ready for this. It was great. It was fantastic.
It launches you. Like, you have that voiceover from Sean Connery. Yeah, Sean Connery's in this, in case you didn't know that. And we're going to get to that. Into that. After the voiceover, it cuts to... And guys, this is not my, we're recording. It's a want to have a drink. Yeah, the dog's absolutely barking in the background, and I'm probably not going to do anything about that. So that's my dog upstairs.
This is why you have children, Tom. This is why you have strapping sons that you can say, "Heed, dog, no."
So the movie opens with this voiceover, and then as the credits start to roll, Princes of the Universe by Queen just starts blasting. And I don't know how not to be hyped by a movie that starts with some Queen, and not just some Queen, but like full 5 recordings of Freddie Mercury going off at once.
Yeah, this is not A Knight's Tale where they take a Queen idea that you know is Queen and they run it through the period of the time. No, this is 1986. Queen is the period of the time. It's nothing but pure, uncut Queen getting jammed into your veins.
That opening scene, like, it sets the tone, and then throughout the movie, every major plot point, every major emotional beat has the exact right Queen song connected to it. Let's say you haven't watched this movie, but you know Queen. You know Who Wants to Live Forever. Yeah, that was written for this goddamn movie. Like, that song plays almost in its entirety as Connor lives with his wife and watches her grow old and die in his arms. Like,
Yeah, and that is a lot of what you mean about how this is kind of a music video. That there are segments where there's a Queen song, and that song is deployed during telling of this story. There's both that, and it is beautiful with him, with his wife dying of old age, which I assume was 42, and that she was shitting herself to death, because statistically...
In the Highlands of Scotland in the late 16th century, yeah, that's absolutely.
And this comes up again in the car ride where the Kurgan takes Brenta on his incredibly terrifying car ride through New York City, and he starts singing, The City That Never Sleeps, and then you realize the music is transitioning into Queen, playing their version of New York, New York, as this drive is coming to an end in the video. And I was like, holy shit, I just watched a video for Queen playing New York, New York, and I loved it. It was scary.
There are elements of Connor and Heather's life as Who Wants to Live Forever playing out that, like, as it builds to crescendos, it's almost like November Rain. Like, you're basically watching November Rain happen.
It's pretty much a Meatloaf video for an hour, for 2 hours.
Oh, it's so close to that, and yet so much better than that.
I will say, this movie doesn't quite seem to know what it is. That I felt like when Connor cracked jokes, it fell flat for me, and particularly in the last fight, when he looks at Brenta and says, "What kept you?" and winks at her. And it was just like, it was like if you were hearing bells or a glockenspiel being played and then somebody hits an anvil. It was just not musical to me.
What's interesting about that, and this is the thing I mentioned to you before we started recording, is that I made my eldest watch it with me, and I realized something that I'd realized a few years, when the last time I watched it, is that the version... No. The version I was watching is not the version I grew up with. And not because it was the edited for TV version. This is an uncut version that has a lot more of Connor cracking jokes and trying to, like, inject humor into the situation that was not there in the original cut.
It really does not come through because Christopher Lambert, for all of his gifts, is not funny.
He can be, but, like, the transition of this brooding loner who's been basically alone for centuries to, like, dropping it's a kind of magic quips. It's not even jokes, it's quips. And this is not a man that quips. Like, I'm sorry, he might tell a joke. It's probably ponderous and long and maybe not very funny, but he does not make a clever quip in the right moment because that's just not it. That's just not
as I was watching this, I was like, this should really be called PTSD the movie, because this is just Connor just not processing all the things that he's seen and being ready for it until he kills the Kurgan and achieves the prize and omniscience, and that seems to soothe things a bit. But before that, Connor is very much drawn back into moments of terror and moments of trauma and bad things that are happening, and that's how this movie... Oh, look at that, Tom. We're moving through the script. We're moving into the movement between time periods section.
Well, before we do quite that part, I just wanted to quickly note that the director, Russell Mulcahy, Australian, but he got a start as a music video director in the late 70s, early 80s. So this style of this movie makes a lot of sense within that context. It also might explain why... I don't know. Mulcahy's good, and obviously I love this movie, but some of the elements of it may not have been served as well by him emphasizing the music combined with the visual and the kind of cuts he really likes to do. He likes fast cuts, hard close-ups, back-offs, all that, and that doesn't always, I think, do necessarily the story the justice it needs, or the action sequences.
Now, along those lines, the way that you just described this, where you take a music video director and you hand them off a movie, this makes me think of a movie that I'm sure no one has ever heard of before, but it's a movie named Entropy from the year 1999, starring Stephen Dorff, a favorite of our friend of the pod, shall we say. But it was directed by Phil Jonu, Joanou. I don't know how to pronounce that. I'm sorry, Phil. But he was a music video director for U2, and he directed the 1988 documentary Rattle and Hum. And he got his first movie that he got to make, like, from a studio about other stuff that wasn't music videos. And the whole movie is about a music video director who is given his first movie and all the problems he has with the studio. And it's just, it's very 1999 as opposed to 1986. But as soon as you said music video director directing a real movie, that's what I thought of. And it, I think those hold up. U2 appears in the movie. Bono is in it as the director's friend. It's actually a fun movie. Anyway, moving on.
You know, as I think about it, I'm shocked that Entropy has not come up before on this podcast.
Okay, other than you, me, and our mutual friend who loves that movie, there's like 2 people who have seen that movie.
We should do a drink.
You know
about
what?
that one.
If we can find a way to fit it into our why not have a drink schedule, absolutely. We're gonna do Entropy. It'll be fun.
Yeah. No, we're doing this. April. How about April?
Sure. Our Easter special. It's abortions and drunken marriages. Good times. Where were we in the script, Tom?
Sounds perfect.
All right. So, the opening wrestling scene, where there's professional wrestling going on, and our hero Connor MacLeod is watching it in the crowd, and they have a really cool, like, aerial camera on a wire effect, I guess. I thought that Connor watching the fake combat in front of him in the WWF, because in 1986 it was WWF kids.
And those were all actual WWF teams. You had the Fabulous Freebirds, you had the Islanders, and you had... Oh, crap. It's in my notes. The Flying...
Were the Freebirds the one with the Confederate flag that I was like, fuck those guys?
Oh, absolutely they were.
Now, were those guys also in the fight scene in Scotland in the old days? Because there was a guy with the really long hair like the Freeburg had.
Okay, I couldn't figure that
But I think it was
part
intentionally
out.
done to make the combat that was happening in the ring and the combat that Connor was recalling in the stadium, like, mixing up in his PTSD head. Because that yellow hair really stuck out to me, and I think that was a bit.
That specific guy is named Michael Hayes, and he is still, I think he's still working for WWE now as a show producer. You know, if you want to look up someone who maybe not the best person on the face of the planet, look up Michael Hayes, and you don't even need any other terms. Kind of sounds like a POS. Anyway, so it was the Freebirds, the High Flyers, and the Islanders. The 2 members of the Islanders are part of the Samoan dynasty, the Ioanai family. You can see the next generation still operating at the highest levels of WWE today. Roman Reigns, Jay and Jimmy Uso. Again, I don't watch wrestling, and for some reason... I have all of this wrestling like data in my head. I don't know why this is.
You're a mystery wrapped
we can move past that point.
in an enigma wrapped in a beard.
Apparently.
Is this the best Scottish movie till Braveheart?
I mean, it's definitely the most Scottish representation
I
see
saw
in a movie.
like those castles were gorgeous. Like as the movie starts out, and as soon as we move back in time, I was like, oh, that'd be real nice. Yeah.
I kind of hope that like the Scottish Tourism Board underwrote this movie because, goddamn, like, don't you want to just go hang in Scotland for a bit, especially the Highlands? Like, it's pretty wild. So in that opening scene, and again, this actually is not in the original cut. While he's watching the wrestling, it cuts back to a battle, and so it's. I mean, look, if you're watching this movie in 1986 and you don't have the internet, you don't have any real context as to what the hell's going on here. Like, I didn't tell my son what the hell was going on, and about 20 minutes in, he's like, "What's happening?" Like, he just had no clue what was. At one point, he looked at me, he was like, "Are they vampires?" I'm like, "No." Like,
You know, okay. You know what?
Great.
That vampire thing, I'm going to come back to that later. But also, in about probably the year 2001, my big sister and I rented the movie Dune on VHS.
Oh, such a good movie.
And apparently, like, when the movie Dune was released, they had, like, palm cards they would hand out to people that defined who was who and what was what, because, like, the movie didn't actually explain it. And we didn't have that card, Tom. So we were trying to watch Dune, and we're watching it going, what the fuck is happening?
You know who directed Dune, right?
Oh, I'm familiar, yes.
Yeah, but his name's not connected to it. He had them pull his name off because they didn't like his 4-hour version that actually explains things a little bit, and so they.
Well, I mean, if you're trying to do Dune, it's gonna take a while. Let me look. They took 5 hours for the modern one.
Yeah,
I have not watched the second one, though. I did enjoy the first.
I actually haven't seen either. Surprisingly, I do.
You don't watch stuff.
It's weird. I have, however, seen the entire early 2000s Sci-Fi Channel miniseries of Dune. Which was quite fun, actually. I like that a lot.
Now that sounds like a Patreon series, Tom.
I mean, we basically just be doing Dune. Like, they do a...
Hey, listeners, let us know if you want to hear us talk about the Dune TV series.
Jesus. There's a lot there. There's a young James McAvoy in the follow-up, Children of Dune.
I can't imagine any of that works out well.
It's actually pretty perfect. We're not talking about Dune tonight. Anyways.
So, Tom, following the script, the next item on the list is just the words Sean Connery followed by a period.
I mean, what else? What else is there to say? It's 1986. Sean Connery is in this movie. Funnily enough, he is not the Highlander. He is actually very much not the Highlander. He
very much took the supporting role and was okay with it. He did great with it.
Apparently, he almost walked off the set, though, because their stunt controls were not the safest, and he was getting pretty pissed.
I definitely noticed the stunt players at different times, particularly with Sean Connery's character. When they were doing the big flying shot of them sword fighting on the hill, I was like, wow, that is not our stars.
Yeah, that was very much Sean Connery being like, fuck you, I'm not doing it.
I'm not climbing up that goddamn hill.
Yeah, so Sean Connery shows up in this movie right after Connor MacLeod is struck down in battle and discovers that he's immortal, though he doesn't know what that... And this is one of the neat things about it, is that... So it's not like they know they're immortal. So, like, they die, and they have no idea what's happening to them. So I actually think there's probably a pretty high mortality rate among the immortals. Like, and just... They just get into the wrong situations consistently. They get picked off by other ones. It's a very predatory... Like, they're growing up as people. They have no idea that they
are both predator and prey.
Yeah, and that's actually what's happening when Connor first dies. The Kurgan has tracked him down, and they never go into this. And there's a lot of explanations that come up later as lore or whatever. I much prefer...
Yeah, as I was watching that, I did not realize, how did the Kurgan know that Connor was who he had to go to? Could he feel that? Because they make it very plain by the rules that they can, feel each other. So maybe Kurgan could feel him in a way that Connor didn't know what to, pay attention to the feeling.
So they do this whole thing in this series where there is an audio cue and, a change in perspective when immortals get near each other, that they can kind of detect that there's another immortal nearby. Because otherwise, how the fuck do you know to, fight these people, right?
How do I know to cut off that guy's head?
Exactly.
As opposed to just cutting off everybody's head.
I need to cut Pete's head off, not Bob's head off, but, and so I think it is sort of a weird sort of magnetism situation, right? That they just sort of pick up on each other, and man, the second movie kind of plays into that it's got aliens. It's weird.
You said the aliens word, so they bring up aliens in Highlander 2, and you don't need to explain that, for the love of God. From what I know, you don't need to explain that. However, Christopher Lambert, who plays the Highlander in this movie, is very off-putting.
Sure.
You know what I mean? He's different. He doesn't sound like he's from the Highlands. He doesn't sound like he's from America. He doesn't move or look at people or act the way that, other people do. He's very off-putting to me as I watch this movie. And I'm not trying to yuck your yum. I'm just saying he does not pass for human in my personal Turing test,
A big part of why I love this movie so much is how he moved through the world made some level of sense to me. So take that for what it is. But Let's do a little bit more on Mr. Connery, and then we can get to good Christopher. So Sean Connery is playing Ramirez. He's a Spaniard, except he's not. So Sean Connery's character is actually over 2,000 years old, was born in Egypt.
2,400 years old. I was amazed at how old he said he was.
And yet, when he dies, he's praying. Hands clasped in a traditional, like, Christian style. It's interesting in that regard.
Oh, who knows what God he was praying to?
That's a really good question. Also because one of the recurring bits in this movie is the idea of love and connection. And he obviously knows Connor when Connor's with Heather, his wife, and he pretty much tells Connor, you have to leave her. Like, it's just going to crush you. And tells him about his last wife, who absolutely, when she died, he was shattered. But it's also why this Egyptian presenting as a Spaniard hanging on the Highlands of Scotland with a Scottish accent that's better than the actual Highlander Scottish accent.
So much better.
Is wielding a katana. Like, yeah. And his last wife was the daughter of a genius craftsman. And this is a plot point in the movie. They use the name Masamune, which is actually the name of the man that's considered to be the greatest swordsmith in all of Japanese history, who lived at the exact time, basically, as MacLeod becomes immortal.
Oh, so wait. So Ramirez saying that he lost his wife is very, like, recent. Like, that's not, like, in hundreds of years.
No, because Ramirez says that he lost her in, like, 500 BC, and when Brenda dates the sword fragments, she dates them back to 500 BC, and Ramirez is like, her father was a genius.
No. Oh, stop. What words do you want said in the horrible Sean Connery accent? Because I can do this.
Her father, Masamune, was a genius.
Her father, Masamune, was a genius.
Perfect. God. That's my new ringtone.
See, this comes from the Venture Brothers, where there is, like, the boys in the Venture Brothers have an uncle who was a friend of their grandfather's, whose name is Colonel Gentleman, and I always have described Colonel Gentleman's voice as the worst Sean Connery impersonation that anyone can possibly make.
Okay, I think we need at some point to do a live stream of us watching Venture Brothers together, so that we can just, I don't know. So you can make me do it, because...
Look, you have made me do Highlander, but that was only like 2 hours, not even 2 hours. The Venture Brothers is much longer, and I have as deep a love for the Venture Brothers as you have for Highlander.
Yeah.
So, listeners, if you want that, please give us some messages, let us know, subscribe to the Patreon, and for the love of God, make Tom watch this, because he needs to. You all have known us enough to know that Tom needs to know about the Venture Brothers.
Yeah, this is probably very, very true. But yeah, in a lot of ways, that's Sean Connery in this movie. He shows up to train MacLeod. He basically says, like, he got, like, he heard that the Kurgans showed up, and trains MacLeod up on what it is to be immortal, improves his fighting skills, offers
He was his dad.
Yeah.
Like, I got the impression that Connor didn't have a dad.
Yeah.
He had Angus, who was not his dad. And Angus, by the way, listeners, Angus MacLeod, the real hero of this movie. Because without Angus MacLeod, he would have been killed right away.
Well, he would have been burned.
Angus is the fucking man.
He would have been burned alive and not died.
They would have eventually gotten around to cutting
Eventually,
his head
they
off.
would have figured it out, yes. Also, the actor that plays Angus plays the older Campbell in Braveheart.
Huh. Well, I mean, if you're a Scottish actor, I guess
I
there's
mean,
only so
you're
many
gonna-
roles.
Look, if you're a Scottish actor of a certain age, if you're not in both Highlander and Braveheart, what are you doing with your life? Like,
If you're in the movies, there's only a couple of them. If you're doing TV, it's just Cole Meany.
so, oh, Jesus Christ. Cole Meany is Irish, you ass.
I know, but you mentioned that he had that Sean Connery had a better Scottish accent than Christopher Lambert. In general, I wanted to talk about the accents because, if Sean Connery was an Egyptian who went and lived with
Everywhere.
the Japanese, he went through some phases. It took a while to get from there to there at the time. And it seems as though, so Christopher Lambert has a very odd accent because he's Swiss. it seems that a person who has been around the world in that, like, wildly weird ways and learning all these other languages would end up speaking every language weirdly, either weirdly or absolutely perfectly. And Christopher Lambert, going from the Highlands and then moving over to America, has no reason to talk like he does. I would expect Sean Connery to talk like Christopher Lambert talks, where there is an accent that we're like, I don't know what that accent is, but that dude's a weirdo, and he speaks a lot of stuff.
I mean, so I think a few points on that. One, Christopher Lambert, I don't think actually has Swiss citizenship, but he grew up in Geneva. He's actually American by birthright citizenship, so we'll see how long that lasts. But his parents were French ambassadors. Like, his dad was a French ambassador, I believe. And then they moved to Geneva, et cetera, et cetera. But yeah, he basically grew up speaking French, which is part of the reason why his English has the inflections it does. And growing up in Geneva, you're speaking a particular kind of French. So there are all those things. One of my sixth grade teachers is a nun, and she grew up in Maine, just on the other side from Canada, in like a French-speaking community. But they spoke a French that hadn't changed since like the 19th century. So her French and her accent is so wildly different from like a Parisian or like someone from Bordeaux. Like, it just, those things happen like with languages. But Connor did not just go straight from the Highlands to the States. There's a bunch of other lore that goes around that. But even if he did, if he had been in the States since the late 18th century to 1986, he was in the States when New York was still speaking with a Dutch accent, and then it was speaking with a different accent, and then it was flattening out into mid-Atlantic, and then it became New York. Like, he would have gone through every version of the New York accent, and that would make anyone sound like they're insane, ultimately. Like, every syllable out of their mouth would make no sense whatsoever. So, cut him a little slack on that particular front. But yes, I would agree, the accents should have been reversed. It also would have been it'd be such a funny movie where Highlander is Sean Connery as Connor MacLeod and Christopher Lambert is Ramirez. We're like, old.
I would love to see it.
Older Sean Connery at this point is dies later in life, and then is being trained up by this young buck that. Actually, this makes a lot of sense. If he's Egyptian from like 2,400 years earlier, odds are very good he didn't get to be as old as Sean Connery was at the point of this movie. So
Sean Connery was a high priest before he first died.
Absolutely, he was.
So, Tom, this sounds in comic terms a lot like the X-Ternals and Sam Guthrie Cannonball from X-Force, who dies and then comes back to life. And Cable explains, "Oh, you're immortal. You're one of these rare immortal beings who are called X-Ternals, and I'm here to help your ascension." And then it's, like, never mentioned again. So it seems like there was, comics always pull from popular culture, but that X-Ternals note seems to be very much taking the Highlander idea and accreting it over into the comics world,
Yeah, I can buy that. There's also Perpetuals, but Perpetuals, that's a Warhammer thing, and like it's basically the same thing.
You're going to have to tell me about that, because I do not know that level of Warhammer.
It's functionally the same thing. It's people that, like, if you kill them, they come back. Like, you can, but it's even more extreme where, like, you can almost atomize a person and they can come back. Like, to kill a Perpetual.
Like Wolverine.
Yeah, pretty much. In terms of time frame, especially in terms of like when the external things started happening, it probably was much more likely a Highlander thing. And hell, Perpetuals might have pulled from Highlander too, for all I know. Warhammer is such a weird coral reef that I don't
That's
even
a
know.
good description. Yeah. I like that. Yeah. So one of the things I did notice about this movie was that I really liked how there were a bunch of holes left in the description of how both Ramirez and MacLeod lived through life and whatnot. You were just told these very specific bits for this very specific story. And I liked that. Like, it was really cool. It left a lot of places for my imagination to fill in the gaps. And that is not something that modern movies do. You know, like, if this movie were to be remade now, it would be done in such a way as to be able to be shown in the Chinese market that tells the story of this immortal and loving women and fighting against these bad people and whatnot in a way that visually tells the story that does not require any language, that I felt that Highlander as a movie kind of lacked. You know what I mean? Like, I felt like I, as the viewer, was filling in a lot of gaps with my understanding of stories and whatnot from the Western tradition, being familiar with Scotland and being familiar with the idea of Spain as opposed to Egypt and blah, 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 and filling in a lot of these gaps. But in the modern way that this story would be told, all of that would be done visually. You know what I mean?
Well, you'd have montage after montage just to like catch you up and give you like site specific things.
Oh, like Wolverine, like the shitty Wolverine movie, Origins.
Which one?
Wolverine Origins, that starts out with like a 2-minute montage of Wolverine through like 200 years. And I remember starting to watch that movie, and my wife at the time was very interested in watching this because Hugh Jackman was in it. And I watched the first minute of this movie and said, "Oh my God, I am a comic book person. Please, for the love of God, do not make me watch this." And she said, "Oh, come on, it can't be that bad." And we watched the movie, and it was so much worse than I thought it was going to be.
I think you're right. I think this kind of storytelling doesn't really happen the same way anymore, and especially if you're going to invest in like a Highlander remake, and as you said, the China market, like just trying to like get things across and whatnot. I'll also say I don't know that a montage would work especially well with Christopher Lambert, whatever. In no small part because like you already discussed how he doesn't feel
he's off-putting.
He's off-putting,
That's the
right?
word I keep coming back to.
And the thing is, you're not wrong to the extent that when he looks at anyone in this movie, it feels like he's not really seeing them, right? And you could say maybe that's like PTSD.
He's looking through them, and it looks like he's looking through their soul.
Right. You could say it's like his PTSD. You could say that it's because he's so old at this point and weary that whatever. But the actual like real world physical reason is because he can't fucking see them. Christopher Lambert has such severe myopia that he literally can't focus on the actors across from him. If he doesn't have his glasses on, and he almost never wears glasses, he almost never has contacts in, he can't look at you. And it's not like I can't look at you because of whatever, like, you know, neurodivergent thing that's going on. It's, no, I just can't look at you. Like, I can't see
physically
you.
Cannot focus my eyes on you in a way that people expect.
Which also tying back into Sean Connery's concerns about the safety of the set. If I was Sean Connery, I would not want a sword fight with a dude who I'm not entirely sure can see where I am at any given moment.
You're absolutely right.
Like, Sean Connery was great, probably insane in some respects, whatever. But, man, that guy had a good sense of self-preservation, and I'm quite confident that he took one look. He had one practice sword fight. It was like, this is bullshit. We are not. Something's going to change here.
Now, that brings me to the next big point on our script, which is swords and swordsmanship.
Yeah, I know.
Because, boy, Tom... All right, look, listeners, you don't know this about me, but when I was in college, I went through a phase with a buddy of Tom and mine, of ours, where we took fencing classes and learned about swords, and we spent a summer watching nothing but The Princess Bride and The Mask of Zorro and The Three Musketeers.
And The Count of Monte Cristo.
And The Count of Monte Cristo, and we called them our sword movies. And so we went through like a whole sword period. And having watched this movie, Tom, I have to tell you, this is the worst swordsmanship I have ever seen on film. They make the Star Wars movies look like a Bruce Lee movie. Okay, this listeners, I know the premise of Why Not is all about taking your favorite series seriously, but if you take Highlander seriously, I have to tell you, folks, look at that swordsmanship with an objective eye, and you will come away a changed individual.
And I will tell you right now, two things. One, we do not yuck yums. We do, however, offer appropriate critique. For instance, in Alpha Flight, you know, I've really enjoyed reading this series. I think there's a lot going for it. But Chris has also introduced me to one of the worst goddamn characters I've ever met in Walt. And I might never forgive him for that. And that's fine. That's just how we talk about things.
Oh, all right.
I will also say that as a kid, it was cool. As a teenager, I'm like, And as an adult, I'm like, yeah, I know, obviously this is bad. Like, there's no foot movement. There's like, it's static. Clancy Brown as the Kurgan is doing his goddamn level best to make these scenes look dynamic. And he's got a very unsafe partner across from him in Christopher Lambert. So I don't know what to do.
You know
with
what?
that.
I'm going to go very hard against you. Now, our script says that we have already referenced the Kurgan several times, but I don't think we've referenced the Kurgan at all.
He's come up a couple times. We've not really gone into him
Obliquely.
at all. Yeah.
I don't find his sword work to be particularly better than the Highlanders or Sean Connery's. All of them found
He commits to the sword play in a way that the others don't.
No, he commits to being a psychopath in the way that the others don't commit.
Which
to
is
being
his
weirdos.
sword play.
Look, listeners, I have made the case to Tom that we should make this episode title "Swords Do Not Work That Way." But having watched a lot about how the swords work in this movie,
Yeah.
swords do not work that way. You cannot disassemble a sword for easy transport the way that the Kurgan does and then reassemble it. Look, you might be able to reassemble a sword, but you would not be able to reassemble a sword in the way that the Kurgan reassembles the sword in this, where there is like a piece at the end that fits halfway in between the whole blade. No, like, sure, you can screw the tang on, and you can screw the handle on, and you can screw the pommel on, but you cannot, like, affix pieces in the middle of the blade the way the Kurgan does. Tom, this is not how sword works.
Yeah, I don't know if you could hear me, but in the background there's like slow acceptance happening. Yeah. No, I get it. I get it. And look, and you know me, I watch a lot of movies with swordplay and action and all that. I get it. Okay? But there's just the kid in me that's watching like swords, like, and different kinds of swords interacting for the first time and just being like, holy.
You know, I will absolutely grant you that watching the Kurgans, I'm going to call that a broadsword. Yeah.
We talked about this earlier, is not long enough by any stretch of the imagination to be a claymore. It is purely a broadsword.
It is definitely a two-handed broadsword.
Absolutely.
But watching him go against Christopher Lambert with his katana, there should have been fundamentally different sword fighting styles happening, and the two of them just wailed at each other like they were holding pieces of metal.
Correct. Highlander the series actually does some amazing things with swordplay. Some really...
I'm glad to hear it, because there were definitely times that somebody grabbed a piece of pipe and used it as a sword the exact same way they had been using a sword instead of using it as a pipe. Tom, I am upset.
I mean, that's reasonable. Adrian Paul, who plays Duncan MacLeod in Highlander the series, not Connor, different MacLeod, it was a trained ballet dancer, a trained dancer.
Well, now you have my attention, my friend.
He knows how to move, and he does a really good job. And sometimes he fights other immortals who fight with a particular style that he also knows. So he goes, fuck it, and just does their style to win. And it's fun.
You know, I have to say, watching this movie and watching Connor MacLeod, I was like, what the fuck has Connor spent his 500 years learning anything? because it seems like Connor, and this is bringing us into our next point, it seems like Connor has spent his 500 years fucking with 5 U's.
Okay, so yes, the subsequent, I hate using this term, the subsequent lore that's built up with Highlander the series and its interaction with the movies.
I love making you say lore,
it makes
by
me
the way.
so angry. But it does establish that Duncan spent a lot of that time fighting, learning how to fight, and learning different ways to fight.
Yeah, but Duncan wasn't in this movie.
Connor, on the other hand...
Who is Duncan?
Duncan is a MacLeod clansman born almost 100 years after Connor, that is immortal, and that Connor finds and Connor trains.
And what happens to Duncan, since we definitively saw that the gathering happened in the Highlander... And so Duncan must have been killed before this, right?
Nope. So Highlander the series assumes what this book assumes is maybe not. Basically, Highlander the series assumes that wasn't actually the gathering. That was just a big fight.
You know, and I really felt as I was watching the movie, I was like, all right, so we've seen like 4 dudes.
Yeah.
This doesn't really feel like a gathering to me. It feels like dispatching the Kurgan. So I can really understand wanting to take the series forward. Except for the fact that Sean Connery tells Connor at the end, "Oh yes, you've definitely won the whole game and you have all the superpowers now."
Wasn't that the PTSD talking?
Maybe.
Right. So, like, we only saw so many immortals. Like, we hear about one that was decapitated in Jersey as a throwaway line among the cops of, like, I just figured that was Jersey before the opening fight where...
Oh, God, the cop scenes are so tedious.
Oh, there's a really fun Crow connection there, though.
Go ahead.
The bald cop.
Yeah?
Yeah, that's Gideon from Gideon's Pawn Shop.
Huh.
Weird, right? Anyway.
Right.
So we only really encounter so many immortals in this movie, which makes sense. It's sort of like the end of things. But one of the ones that we encounter,
I think it's like 4, 5.
I mean, if you count Ramirez, it's Ramirez-MacLeod, the Kurgan, Castigar, Faisal. Yeah, it's 5. We only hear about the other one that gets killed off screen.
Faisal's the one that tries to kill him at the beginning, right?
Yes, correct. That does
it's like 5 through the whole thing.
Who does unnecessary backflips, which were also not in the original.
Oh God, so many backflips, Tom. Thank you for bringing that up.
Was not in the original cut. Look, if this was the version I saw as a kid, I don't know who I am. Right? Like, I'm a little shook. But the guy that plays Castigar, you've actually seen before in a few movies.
Really?
He plays Captain Panaka, the head of Queen Amidala's guard, in episodes 1 and 2, and maybe 3, 1 and 2. Yeah.
And I remember liking him in those because I was like, oh, he seems to be the only fellow with his head on his shoulders here.
Well, not to, but bump head on his shoulders. But sorry. But that's not the only Star Wars connection. The taxi driver style gunman who shoots Kurgan after he kills Castigar. That guy played the Rebel Alliance pilot who locates Han and Luke on Hoth in Empire Strikes Back.
All right, see, I did not see him as a taxi driver style person. I saw a Marine in a Firebird, and I was like, oh, he's really upset that he can't protect himself, and thought, this is 1986, and golly, that guy feels like the guy who lives next door to me.
Oh, wow. There's a little potato going on there, I think.
Yeah, a little bit, yeah. So I really don't want to run down the sword fighting about this too much more because it's been fun, but no, Tom, I know that you love this movie, and I'm not here to yuck your yum. Talk to me about Connor and women, because as we already established, Connor has 5 U's, okay? A major theme of this movie is that Connor falls in love with women and is loyal to them. And it's not that he's just banging his way through humanity, which, let's face it, a lot of dudes would do. But he falls in love. He stays with Heather until she dies of old age, and he looks exactly the same as the day that they met. And that is a big deal in Connor's backstory. In the final fight, which looks like a music video and is amazing with this backlit windows, and I think that Blade 2 copied off of that fight a bit.
Oh, I could totally see Del Toro using that as a reference. Absolutely.
Yeah, in that horrible, dodgy CGI fight in Blade 2, that is Highlander.
I guess the lesson is don't use that backdrop because the fights never look good or never look good enough.
But in that fight, the only reason that Connor is victorious over the Kurgan is that Brenda jumps in and interrupts the Kurgan and blah, 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 and gives him a chance to get his sword back. And then he drops his ridiculous bon mot with her. And then we get the most awesome scenes of the movie!
Do you actually feel that way, or are you just...
Well, the people who made the movie very much felt that way. Because,
oh, no, they absolutely did.
You know what I mean.
But yeah, I mean, like, picking up on what you were saying in terms of like Connor and women. Yeah, you said that, like, you know, he fucks with 5 U's. I'm not entirely convinced of that. I mean, I think he definitely was, like, seeing people throughout time. I kind of don't think he had a serious relationship between, like, Heather and Brenda.
I agree.
But I think he was absolutely cutting a swath through New York society.
Well, yeah. Okay, so that duel in the Revolutionary area,
that was in the original. That was in the original cut.
That was in the original.
Yeah.
Okay, because him drunkenly just being
wasn't
like,
it funny as
fuck
shit?
you, dude.
was okay. So just to set it up just a little bit, because it's just funny to talk about. It cuts to the Boston Green. Like, this is him and Cassiger reminiscing about his famous duel on the Boston Green, where he's drunk off his ass, apparently called someone's wife a fat warthog. So he got challenged to a duel by, like, a Brit based on how he's dressed.
Royalist.
And just keeps getting killed. He keeps getting stabbed through the
over
heart,
and over
drops,
again.
stands back up, and at one point after the third time it happens, he giggles, and the guy's just like, "What is?" And so eventually he, like, goes, "I'm sorry. Hey, I'm apologizing for doing this, and I bid you."
Yeah, he absolutely did everything he was supposed to do to end this with honor. And the other dude with his effete foppish second who was trying to kiss him after every victory. Oh, God, Tom, the whole thing was just weird.
It was so weird.
Just weird.
It was so weird.
Like, I can see why they refer to that as, like, oh, yeah, your famous duel. Oh, yeah. And Connor's like, fuck, that was a weird fucking day.
But that's where Christopher Lambert is funny.
I agree, yeah.
He actually does have a sense of physical humor. He has a sense of, oh, this doesn't match. This is odd, awkward, or whatever. Him dropping a fucking quip is not remotely his strength. You know? Like, you know what he was actually doing? The quips that he was dropping were fucking James Bond lines. And James Bond's already in this movie not doing that. So don't make him do it, okay? Is what I'm going to say to that particular point. But yes, Connor is fundamentally loyal.
He understands human love.
Yes.
In a way that the Kurgan does not.
This is a weird part of this movie, is that the Kurgan is awful. Is like a horrifying version of human nature. Well, we'll get to that in a second, but he's also kind of vaguely fun. Like, he's so over the top that he's like, shit, this is actually kind of a fun movie monster. Like, he's a movie monster.
He is a movie monster who speaks speech and yet is also terrifying. And first of all, young Clancy Brown is far sexier than he should be.
He is a smoke show. Like, holy shit.
Until the third act.
When
but
he shaves his
definitely
head,
a smoke show. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh. He's also a fucking unit. He is a big goddamn dude.
And that comes across in this movie very much, where they use that to good benefit. However, when he starts like just cutting out steel support beams at the end in the final denouement, that's not how swords work. And I'm willing to give it some magic that they're like, we see these sparks when they are hitting their swords together. There's some magic that's happening between the different.
There's added effects of like lightning looking sparks flying off of it too. It's not just like
they
against
hook
metal.
up a wire to the swords. I've watched YouTube videos, Tom, so clearly I'm an expert.
Jesus Christ. Yeah. So anyways, yeah, I mean, so like that gets into this whole idea of the quickening. The quickening is described throughout the movie in a lot of different ways. I actually love they use the term quickening.
I think it's cool too. I agree.
Yeah. The quickening is the sensation of like when the immortals like are near each other, they can kind of feel each other. When one immortal wins over the other, they absorb the other's quickening. The fact that quickening is terminology for when a fetus is like physically felt, and these are people who can't ever have kids, is, I think, unintentional, but really great.
No, I think that it is absolutely intentional, because the quickening of what Ramirez tells Connor the quickening is when Connor has died for the first time, and he's feeling what it feels like to not be dead, and figuring out what his life actually means. Now, traditionally, quickening refers to when a mother is able to feel a baby moving inside of her. It's moving. It's quick. It's the quickening. And
right. I mean, there's an element of like life force to it. There's also a scene in the movie where Ramirez and MacLeod are on a beach, and there's a deer in the distance, and Ramirez tells him like feel its heart, and MacLeod is able to eventually like from a distance sync up with the heart of the deer, and they both like take off running, and it's like it's so joyful, and like it's so fun, it's so cool, but like it also is suggesting what the prize eventually is that like this ability to be one with the world around you.
So Ramirez is the Professor Xavier to Connor's Cyclops.
I would need to ponder that one for a minute, but
the only other point that I wanted to bring up was, okay, so Sean Connery has been alive since, I believe by the math, like 1000 BC, right?
Yes, basically.
Okay, so Sean Connery is essentially like Apocalypse from the X-Men, except without the alien ship. If Apocalypse and the X-Ternals were made into the same story, that's exactly the movie that we have, except that Sam Guthrie is in the role of Connor MacLeod.
Could you imagine?
Now, Tom, think about that. Oh,
shit. Could you imagine Highlander set up now, except it's about a dude from Appalachia?
Oh my god. Oh, holy shit. Okay, so a Highlander story that is focused on Sam Guthrie from Kentucky in the 80s is absolutely beautiful, Tom.
Oh, that's some hot shit. I like this so much. I think there are just a couple more things I want to hit on. One is, and you brought this up when we were talking before the recording, is the idea of how much the immortals remember. And you drew a really nice comparison to the comic Capes by, I'm going to butcher his last name, but Michael Avon Wemming, something like that. I've never known how to pronounce his last name, but he's great. He's great. He does cool shit.
Let me help you out there, buddy.
Thank you.
I do not know how to pronounce his name, but the whole point is that he wrote the book Capes, where there was an immortal hero who had lived for about the same time period as Ramirez in this case. except he could only remember what an average human could remember. So about, at best, 90 years. So he had lived for thousands and thousands of years, but could only remember the last 90 years of those periods. And moving forward, I found that the way that Highlander treated the living and being different people as being a very compelling way of putting that idea forward to the public.
The immortals that we encounter across, like in Highlander itself, like they remember pretty much seemingly everything. They're in their 30s and they've remembered the last,
Okay,
500
Sean
years
Connery
of
is not in his 30s.
Fine.
Okay.
Setting aside Sean. But they seem to have full recall of their lives. Maybe like they don't remember everything in every moment, or they have to oh, what was that again? But like in general, they have full recall, which is, I don't know. It's interesting. You think it would make them go absolutely batshit. Like to have that much information, have that much social interaction. I mean, maybe that's why Connor is like doing okay, is that he was a bit of a recluse after a while. Like, I don't know. It's rough shit. But that also, like, as a kid, that really tickled my fancy. This idea of living through everything, and knowing everything. Like, that's cool. That has there's an allure to that. I don't know.
To bring that into MCU terms, that would be Shang-Chi's dad.
Yeah.
Yeah, who has lived through all of these things and seen all of this bit and is still like a dude,
Yeah. I think what Capes is doing is situating a superhero within like a very human context. And I think Highlander they're immortal. They're just fundamentally different. They don't die, they don't age, they don't really get sick. Like none of these things really happen to them. They get badly injured and they pop right back up. They're not human.
The last point that I would say is that so Sean Connery was like born in roughly like 1800 BC.
Yes,
right,
approximately
ish. So,
but I love that you keep calling it Sean, like not Ramirez, Sean Connery. Like it made me do like a brief moment of
Sean Connery was born in roughly 1800 BC ish. So with that, Ramirez here is basically like Apocalypse from the X-Men if he hadn't found the alien ship, because he's an Egyptian from about that same time period, right?
Yes. And it's really funny you bring up the alien ship, because in Highlander 2, The Quickening, the Immortals are aliens.
Well, Christopher Lambert kind of gives that vibe through the whole thing.
The funny thing is, I say that and you totally buy it, because you're like, I'm pretty sure Christopher Lambert is in his personal life.
Seems like in his personal life thing.
Is an alien. He was married to Diane Lane, by the way.
Oh,
right!
Bravo, my friend.
All right. That's also one of the things I mean, like, we'll get back to we don't even have to get back to the alien bit, because someday we'll talk about Highlander 2. It's just a disaster of a movie.
Well, we can't do it for Thanksgiving, because this is our Thanksgiving special. There can be only one, Tom.
We'll do it for the 4th of July.
What?
I don't know. I just threw a date. A fucking Arbor Day. I don't care.
Arbor Day. That is much better than the 4th of July.
But one of the things that I love about this movie, and one of the things I love about Christopher Lambert in this role, is that Christopher Lambert is in fact handsome, but he isn't like you stop and look like, what the hell just walked by me sort of handsome. He's much more like, oh, that's interesting. And then you look at him a little longer, like, oh, that's more interesting. Like, he sneaks up on you a bit. And that's how the character of Connor MacLeod moves in the modern, 1986 day. Like, he's interesting, and that pulls you in.
Listeners, I knew Tom and his wife before she was his wife, and I have to tell you, Tom just described how it is that he bagged his wife.
And Yeah,
Yeah,
there's
you can cut this. It's okay.
no lie. There's no lie there. I married way out of my league.
Way out of your league, my friend.
And you know what? Badge of fucking honor, dude. Like, absolutely.
All right, Tom. Now, final thoughts moments. I would say this movie does not work. Look, for all that it has going for it, this movie does not work without Queen providing the soundtrack.
Yeah. I mean, look, I don't know that this movie... that's a lie. I know for a fact that there is no universe in which this movie means this much to me if Queen is not providing all of the music. Like all the...
Oh, you mean that you've watched Highlander too?
I've watched so much Highlander, like too much Highlander. Like it's...
I assume there is no Queen in Highlander 2.
You know what's funny? There might be. It's that bad that I blocked most of it out. I know the basic story beats, but if you want texture, fuck you. Like there's no texture to Highlander 2. Like,
all right, fair enough.
Everything we've praised about this movie for like being like of New York and having this New York feel, yeah, that movie exists on a soundstage, and it's the worst soundstage. It's a cursed soundstage. We will have to do this movie at some point simply because my eyes will bleed and you'll have such... You will... Anyway, it's interesting. Queen is the stabilizing force for this movie. As we discussed at the outset, like all the big plot beats, all the big emotional moments are scored by Queen. But it isn't out of place for this heartfelt ballad to take place as Heather ages in 16th century Scotland to sound like Queen. It just makes sense. There's something about the sound of Queen and the sound that Queen is creating for this movie that so thoroughly works with a person out of time. This movie isn't quite working with archetypes, but it's like playing in that same sandbox. And Queen is the sound that you imagine like the best final boss fight to be scored by Queen. Your heroic moment happens with Queen. The fucking Mighty Ducks sang "We Are the Champions" for a goddamn reason, people.
Or A Knight's Tale starring Heath Ledger, which begins with boom, boom, clap, boom, boom, clap, boom, boom, clap. Tom, next time, maybe we'll go talk about A Knight's Tale.
We could totally do A Knight's Tale.
I would have a blast pivoting off of Queen from here into A Knight's Tale there.
I think that'd be fun. And I also want to say this before we fully wrap up.
I want to make your teenager watch A Knight's Tale with you and then put him on the microphone and tell us what he thought about the movie.
Considering that he did not love Highlander, I feel like this is you exacting some sort of revenge on me. But,
what are you talking about? Like, he didn't like your movie. He's going to love my movie.
Yeah.
Right?
Which I was before you said that. I was going to say, hey, buddy, I know you didn't love this one, but thank you for humoring me and thank you for watching it. And also thank you for like taking it honestly, like you took it seriously. There are things to pick apart about this movie. Absolutely. I think you get why it means so much to me. Like, I think
I absolutely do.
And that makes me feel good that it was not just what the fuck. A combination of this is terrible and why am I working with this guy? Like that would be a whole other thing.
No, I am so glad to get to ride along with you on a childhood memory that makes you happy about this. There are ridiculously sillier things that I could take you along a similar ride. Like, I don't think you're going to take this ride for the movie that is called The Pirate Movie, which is the reason why the Razzie Awards exist. It was such a bad movie that Hollywood said, yeah, we need a set of awards to recognize how awful these movies are. And the first one that we need to recognize is the pirate movie. As a kid, that was on VHS, the same as Blazing Saddles and the same as Airplane. And 7-year-old me did not know how to make a differentiation between them. So I look forward to making you do those 3 movies, my friend.
You have my curiosity. Now you have my interest. And on that particular note, thank you. Thank you for hanging out with us, and thank you, Chris, again, for humoring me. Why Not Have a Drink is brought to you by the Excelsior Embroidery Company. Come check out all of their exclusive Highlander-based patches. Chris doesn't know that I'm telling you the world that you're going to do this, but you know he's going to because I asked him very sweetly to do so. See those patches and the 150 other items for sale, including comic book themed patches, towels, and wall hangers, all at excelsiorembroidery.etsy.com.
Folks, I have to tell you, boy, I am excited to make some Highlander-related patches because Tom drunkenly said that we had to.
Hey guys, it's actually a race because he can only make one of each.
There can only be one.
Why Not Read with Chris and Tom is recorded in Chicago, Illinois, and deep beneath stately Baker Manor in a fashionable neighborhood that somehow let him in outside St. Louis. It is produced and edited by me, Tom Flynn, God help me and rest my soul, with background cat noises provided by Teeny. Join us for our next dive into a favorite, I don't know, we'll see, movie or show. And thanks again for hanging out with us.
See you next time.